Today we're going to talk about taking the distributive property when there's more than one in a sentence, or if there are more operations than just the distributive property. These notes you will find on the back side of your one distributive property notes that you have. This is, so on this, notice we have a parentheses here and a parentheses here. Even though there is not a number here, there is understood to be a -1 here. Now, when we take that -1 times that -3c, we get a +3c. When we take that -1 or just a negative times a +7, we get a -7. We just take the 6x plus 2 out of parentheses. That's what you do first of all, is you have, in your order of operations, is you have to get rid of your parentheses. So with this one, there's nothing in front of it to do. So we're just going to, so I would suggest that when you're working your problems, that you take a highlighter. We're going to take this highlighter, we're going to start at this back parentheses, we're going to highlight through this parentheses and through the sign that's here. That is your distributive property, and you have to take care of that first. Now, after we've gotten that taken care of, we're going to take the 6c plus the 3c, and that gives us a 9c. When we put this into our calculator, we put 2 minus 7, and 2 minus 7 is a -5 in your calculator. We're just going to use this sign right here, just like a minus sign, and we read it minus. It's also understood as a negative. So this is 9c minus 5. Now let's go over here to number 7. Here again we have the same situation. We have our parentheses here, but there's nothing in front of it. But first of all, let's highlight. Let's highlight this parentheses all the way over through the sign. Now, we can bring down our 5f, we can bring down our minus g. Remember that if it's a g, there is one g there. And if there's one g there, we can put imaginary 1 there. Now, when we take a negative times a positive 3f, we get a -3f. When we take a negative times a positive g, we get a negative g, or a negative, and again, there's one g there, so we put a 1. Because when we put this into our calculator, we have to put in a number. So now, to calculate this, we're going to put into our calculator 5 minus 3. The two f terms are alike. So 5 minus 3 is 2f. Then for our calculator, we're going to put a -1 minus 1 into our calculator. We get a -2g's. Now, remember that when we talked about this in class, we have 2 frogs minus 2 goats. We can't do anything with that. These are not like terms, so it stays 2f minus 2g. You do not do anything else unless these two are alike. Now let's move over to number 8. Number 8 is a little bit different. This parentheses is okay because there's no sign out in front of it. This one has a sign in front of it, so we're going to highlight starting right here and go all the way across. Now let's draw our arrows to remind us what we're doing with our distributive property. We're going to take this positive times this 8x. That gives us positive 8x. We're going to take this positive times this -2y. A positive times a negative is a -2y. Yes, we read it when we're reading it just for plain purposes. We read this as a -2y, but for all purposes, this is also the sign on the 2. So it is a -2y. We copy down the 8x plus the 2y. Now I have highlighted here the terms that are alike. 8x plus 8x is 16x. A positive 2y minus 2y's gives us 0y's. And 0 times y is 0 times anything is 0. So what we get from that is 16x plus 0. Now when you add 0 to 16x, you get just plain 16x. When you get a 0 in front of a letter, it just goes poof. It goes away. Because when we add it here, we are going to get the same thing back. Now here's what we're going to be doing today. We have a distributive property right here that's inside here. There's not two parentheses here, so we have to get rid of the parentheses first. We cannot add 2 plus 5x. So we take our highlighter and we're going to highlight from this parentheses through this parentheses all the way and highlight the sign out in front of it. So all of this is highlighted. Now, you bring down the 4x. We are going to take this negative 3, and yes, we're going to consider this a negative 3 times this positive 2. A negative 3 times a positive 2 is a negative 6. Do not put two signs here. A negative times a positive is a negative 6. Now we're going to take this negative 3 times this positive 5x. This negative times this positive gives us a negative. 3 times 5 is 15. And then we have our x. Now, I have highlighted the 4x and the minus 15x. To put this into your calculator, you will put in 4 minus 15. When you do that, you get a negative 11x. Now, we have a minus 6. So our answer is a negative 11x minus 6. We cannot do any more arithmetic to this because this has an x, this does not. They are not like terms. Okay, now let's go on to the next one. We have more than that here. We have this parentheses, so we're going to highlight the parentheses all the way out here to the sign. That whole thing has to be highlighted. So now, we're going to write down the 3. This is a positive 7. We're going to take this positive 7 and multiply it by positive 6. Positive times positive is a positive. 7 times 6 is 42. Now let's go to the next one. We're going to take positive 7 and multiply it by negative 5x. Positive times negative is a negative. 7 times 5 is 35, or a positive 7 times a negative 5 is a negative 35x. Now just bring down your plus 4x. Now, we have 3 and 42 are just constants. They don't have any letters, so we can combine them. So put into your calculator 3 plus 42. Underneath that, you will write down 45. To figure out these two, these both have x's on them. So take these x's, we're going to put into our calculator a negative 35 plus 4. And we're going to get a negative 31x. We cannot combine these because one has an x, the other one doesn't.